16 of the 17 endemics can be seen in the far southwest corner of the island, and some special birds are more easily found in that area. Parguera is a seaside town and makes a good base from which to access a number of birding sites. We stayed there for 3 nights, based at the Hotel Villa Parguera. Early the next morning, we were keen to get started. This immature yellow-crowned night heron was seen from the hotel grounds. We then headed inland towards the Maricao National Forest. Lying at the western end of the Central Range, this area is recognized as a good place to find several endemics, including the rare and localized elfin woods warbler, which was only discovered as recently as 1971. One of the first birds seen was a scaly-naped pigeon. This Caribbean specialty is not endemic as it is found in several other islands, including Cuba and Hispaniola, but it proved easier to see here. Then the first endemic appeared, the Puerto Rican tanager. Followed by Puerto Rican spindalis, Puerto Rican emerald, and Puerto Rican oriole, while Puerto Rican bullfinches were heard feeding high up in a tree.
Oh, that's a big grasshopper.
Unfortunately, the elfin woods warbler was only heard briefly and was not seen at this site. However, there was a scarce lesser Antillean pewee perched in the open on a metal gate. Back up the hill at another site, we walked down towards the valley. On tape, a feeding flock came in. Among them were a cooperative Puerto Rican woodpecker, another endemic, and 2 nice elfin woods warblers. At the west end of Parguera is the famous hardware store Stakeout for the endangered yellow-shouldered blackbird. Every morning, and at about 5 p.m, the owner throws out hunks of bread to the feeding station. The blackbirds punctually come in from the mangroves to feed. Under threat of development and nest parasitism by the shiny cowbird, the southwestern coastal mangroves are the last stronghold for these birds. But the Parguera hardware store is certainly the easiest place to see them. Conservation efforts have increased the endangered blackbird's total population to about 1,250 as of 2014. The hardware store site also supports a small flock of introduced collared doves. At first glance one might assume Eurasian collared dove, but actually most of them are African collared doves, another introduced species. Look closely. This bird has grey under tail coverts as in Eurasian, but the wingtips are brown versus blackish. It might be a hybrid. There was one leucistic individual in the group. It is also a good spot for the troupial, an established species originally introduced from northern South America. Most of the subtropical dry forest in Puerto Rico has been cleared by the island's growing population. One of the last remaining patches of this threatened habitat is protected as the Guanica Dry Forest, a World Biosphere Reserve. It is home to 11 of Puerto Rico's endemic birds. The most important is the rare and elusive Puerto Rican nightjar. Habitat requirements for the nightjar seem fairly strict. Trees, not scrub, right next to the road, preferably growing over the road and forming a semi or closed canopy. Each island in the Greater Antilles has its own endemic lizard cuckoo. Hispaniola actually has two. So on Puerto Rico, as one might expect, it is the Puerto Rican lizard cuckoo. We soon found the Puerto Rican emerald, another endemic, easily identified by its long, deeply forked tail. Actually, Adelaide's warbler is not strictly endemic, as it also occurs in Barbuda and on St. Lucia. The first evening was rainy and rather windy, and we dipped on the nightjar. However, we found a roosting mangrove cuckoo as consolation.
Do you see the eyes? Oh, that's the eye. Just now it moved.
Mangrove cuckoos are widely distributed in the Caribbean, and there are a variety of local names for it, such as rainbird, 4 o'clock bird, coffin bird, and go-go, amongst others. The next day we waited until dark, and were just about to give up when suddenly we heard 2 rip calls. Then the bird flew out and landed on an overhanging branch for a split second, flew back past us and disappeared. It was certainly not the best of views, but mission accomplished. The southwest part of Puerto Rico also has some good wetlands, one of which is the Cartagena Lagoon. This is a marshy lake known as a stakeout for West Indian whistling duck, masked duck, and Caribbean coot. The area is also good for the introduced orange-cheeked waxbill, originally from Africa. It was rather windy, but we had good views of the glossy ibis and picked up Sora here. Caribbean coot is considered near threatened on the IUCN list. For Caribbean coot, one needs to focus on the frontal shield. In Caribbean coot, the shield is thicker. This can actually be seen in a good profile view, wider so it looks more bulbous, and larger, extending further up the forehead to a point just before the eye. It has no reddish-brown band across the top, so the overall impression is of a larger and more conspicuous shield. In American coot it is smaller, narrower, and terminates in a reddish-brown band along the upper edge. This makes it appear smaller and less conspicuous. Glossy ibis is the most widespread ibis species. Populations in the Americas are thought to have originated in the Old World. After the Cartagena Lagoon, we moved on to the Boquerón National Wildlife Refuge. The man-made pools here yielded typical wetland species, such as snowy egret. An osprey was bathing in the shallow water. We were lucky to get good close views of a white-cheeked pintail here, because although the species has an extensive range, they are often hunted and hence quite wary. There are in fact 3 subspecies. This is the Caribbean race Bahamensis, hence the older name Bahama pintail. It occurs in the Bahamas and throughout the Greater Antilles, but seems to be generally uncommon, or at least never seen in large numbers. In addition to marshy areas, they seem to like extensive salt lakes and saline lagoons, for example Lago Enriquillo in the Dominican Republic, but strangely we do not see any on the extensive lagoon systems around Cayo Coco, Cuba in March 2012. This subspecies also occurs in Trinidad and northern South America, as far south as northeast Brazil, and has occurred as a vagrant in Florida. Further on, the main track is bordered by mangroves. This is supposed to be a good spot for the Lesser Antillean peewee, but we failed to find it here. We then moved on to the extreme southwest tip of Puerto Rico at Cabo Rojo. The dry coastal scrub here provides good habitat for the Caribbean Elenia, which seems to prefer the transition between dry scrub and the mangroves. This road provides access to some extensive saline lagoons, good for shorebirds. We found 2 Wilson's phalaropes here, which are rare in Puerto Rico.
Estaba allí en la entrada del puente hace como 3 o 4 días. ¿Sí? Pero me asomé hoy, pues como estaba entre las ramas, aquel día no la pude.
The Antillean mango is widespread in Hispaniola. On Puerto Rico it is mainly found at low elevations in the western part of the island. By now it was time to move on to the northern parts of the island. We were quite pleased with the results so far.